Last class, check your understanding. Manager of a fast food restaurant wanted to reduce the proportion of drive-through customers who had to wait longer than 2 minutes to receive their food after placing an order. Based on store records, the proportion of customers who had to wait longer than 2 minutes was P equals 0.63. To reduce this proportion, the manager assigns an additional employee to drive-through orders. So I think we've seen that at a famous chicken place where they have extra people. During the next month, the manager collects a random sample of 250 drive-through times, and he finds, yay, P hat, his sample proportion, is 0.576. So it seems like, yay, we reduced that wait time down based on that sample, but we want to know, was it really effective or not, or could this have just happened by chance? So the manager performed the hypothesis test. His null hypothesis, again, null hypothesis was that there was really no difference at all. We just happened to get a sample proportion much smaller. Or the alternative, the thing that we were actually trying to show, the alternative is that we really did lower the proportion of people who had to wait for longer than 2 minutes. So type 1 error, I always like to write this out. So type 1, we rejected the null, but the null was true. Look, we made the best decision we could at the time, but then maybe we get another sample later, a larger sample, and it turns out we were wrong, okay? You're not going to know as you're doing the problem if you're right or wrong. They'll have to come tell you later based on some other evidence, okay? So we did make the best decision we could at the time. We rejected the null, but actually the null was true. So for type 1 error, in practice, what does that mean? If we rejected the null, that means, yay, we really thought that we reduced the wait time. So we found evidence that we reduced the proportion of people who had to wait longer than 2 minutes. But actually, the wait time was still, 2 minutes. I don't know. The proportion was actually still the same. So we thought we reduced the wait time, but we actually didn't. And I'm still saying that as far as time. It should be proportion. So we thought, I like phrasing it like this. We thought something, but actually something. So that's what you would do every time. So let's fill in what we thought versus what actually happened. So we thought we lowered proportion of customers waiting. Wow. Longer than 2 minutes, but actually we didn't lower the proportion. In other words, we thought our extra drive-through guy worked, but it actually didn't. So you could also phrase it that way. And that would be like taking it one step further. So I kind of like to describe what we thought versus what the truth was. And then we can talk more about consequences. So for number 2, we'll get into the further consequences of what actually happened. And this part is usually, easier for people that have real world experience. So people who are out there in the real world. Okay. Type 2. I kind of like to write this beginning part. Type 2, we failed, and look at this, to reject the null. Maybe Coach Owings already did that. If not, I'm not that creative, huh? We failed to reject the null, but the alternative was true. So again, we thought something, but actually something else. So we thought blah, 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 but actually blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, and if we were in AP, we would probably want to phrase this a little differently. We would want to talk about we found evidence or we didn't find evidence. But I like to kind of simplify it a little bit since we don't have that AP exam that we're trying to, go for. I like to simplify our language a little bit. So if we failed to reject the null, that means that we thought the null, but actually the alternative is the truth. So we thought that we didn't make a difference. We thought we didn't lower the proportion, but actually we did. And the consequence of that is we fire the extra drive-through guy, but actually he was helping. You know what I mean? So we thought we didn't lower proportion, blah, blah, blah. If you have more room, you can write more. We thought we didn't lower the proportion, but actually we did. My email's going crazy. All right. Which type of error is more serious? Well, let's talk about the consequences. So what are the consequences of a type 1? Type 1, the consequence is that we keep that extra drive-through guy around, but he's not actually helping us go any faster, right? He isn't making a difference. In a type 2, we fire the drive-through guy or relocate him some other way. We fire the extra guy, but he was actually helping. All right, and when your customers are waiting longer, you have, more customer satisfaction, more repeat business, and you can get more people through the drive-through and make more money, right? So it kind of depends on your perspective. If you're the drive-through guy, you're like, okay, I would rather, be kept around. But if you are the business owner, you don't want to be paying someone for not helping your bottom line. And if he's not actually helping get more customers through, that's not great. But if you fire the guy, okay, now you don't have to pay as much, but he was actually helping. So now you're also back slower. So you're not having to pay an extra worker, but you're also losing out potentially on more revenue, customer satisfaction, that sort of thing. So it's really your call here. So you guys on your own need to make this call. You just need to be able to defend your answer. With like real world language, not like cussing language, just like talk to me about what would happen. Okay. You can choose which one is worse. I would say we should take the perspective of the manager. So you should definitely be the manager. Which one would be worse? Which error is more serious on the part of the manager? It's not always obvious. A lot of times type 2 is worse, but that's not always the case. That seems like it'd be kind of bad, right? To fire the extra guy. Based on your answer to question 2, do you agree with the company's choice of alpha equals 0.1? So what you need to know is that alpha is your probability of making a type 1 error. So you have a 10% probability of making a type 1 error when you choose this level. So if a type 1 error is more serious, then you probably don't want to make it as often as 10%. You probably want to lower that. But if you chose a type 2 error, then it's probably fine. So again, this 3 is really based on your answer to number 2. So what you need to know for that one is that alpha is the probability of making a type 1 error. So you can lower alpha to 0.05, 0.01, 0.001, 0.005, whatever you want. I haven't really seen them much higher than 0.1. 10% is kind of a high alpha. So if anything, you'd lower it. You wouldn't raise it. Okay, so here's the p-value. Their p-value is 0.0385, 3.85%. It's pretty low. P-value is low, reject the hoe. So anyway, but we're not actually making a decision based on this p-value. We're just interpreting. So this one is kind of similar wording that we've used before. So like, if the null is actually the truth, this is the probability of getting what we got. So and there's a million ways you could word this. So if you word it a little differently, there's a few important things that I'll point out. So if the true proportion of drive-through customers waiting longer than 2 minutes. So if the true proportion, blah, 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 is actually 0.63, it was 0.63, right? Yeah. Then the probability of getting p hat of 0.576 or less, because we're not just concerned with 0.576. It could be anything less. So I'll kind of highlight what we did here. We're assuming the null is true, 0.63. And then we got something way down here. Well, we can't find the probability of just one thing. So we're going to find the probability of that or more extreme. And because we're interested in lowering our proportion, we're shading the left side, the less than side. If the true proportion of drive-through the customer is waiting longer than 2 minutes is actually that, then the probability of getting that is about 0.0385. Okay, so if the true this is actually this, then the probability of getting p hat of that or less is about that. So the only things that you're going to have to change in this sentence are the underlined parts. Everything else stays the same. It's a conditional probability. Based on that being the truth, the probability we would get what we got or more extreme is about that. All right. Okay. So,